What's up guys, welcome to another video. Today we are in a 2023 Acura TLX Type S. We're on an unfamiliar road up here in Houston, Texas. First time I'll be filming a video in Texas, very excited. And Sahil, the owner of this car, has been gracious enough to give me a go. Very interesting because this is kind of like a sister car to my Integra Type S. It's Apex Blue Pearl on the outside with an orchid interior. And I gotta say, ever since I got my Integra, I've been very curious about the TLX Type S. Being a bespoke platform, no longer shared with the Honda Accord like the previous TL and TSX, I wanted to see if it really deserves that Type S badge. So a few specs about the car. It has a 3-liter twin-scroll turbocharged V6 producing 355 horsepower, 354 pound-feet of torque. It makes that peak torque as low as 1500 RPM, and peak power comes on at 5500 RPM, and redline looks to be 6200 RPM, so a pretty low revving engine, at least for a performance car. We have a 10-speed torque converter automatic transmission. It's been retuned from the standard unit in the regular TLX with the 2-liter turbocharged engine. This one should shift anywhere from 30 to 40% quicker, and of course super handling all-wheel drive. What does it mean? How does it work? It's a front-wheel drive based all-wheel drive platform. You can see the engine sits well forward of that front axle, but it can send up to 70% of available torque to the rear axle, and the rear axle has some fancy clutch packs and gear sets that can then divert 100% of that 70% of torque to either of the rear wheels. Also, the rear wheels are overdriven by 2.7% compared to the front. So all in all, it should mean that despite this car's inferior front-wheel drive based system, it should feel pretty nimble and sprightly on throttle. It should help get this car rotated coming out of corners. We'll test if there's any truth to that statement. The unfortunate thing about this car is that it weighs over 4,200 pounds. That is 1,000 pounds heavier than my Integra Type S. Is this car going to feel sluggish? Is it going to feel inert in the corners? That's what I want to know. Some other things to note: electric power steering, brake-by-wire. Also, let's talk about price for a moment. $57,000 more or less MSRP for this 2023, which is the pre-facelift model. The new 2024 model gives you a couple of extra things like a heads-up display, slightly tweaked exterior design, and costs a couple of $1,000s more. Sahil mentioned he picked this up for actually a little bit under MSRP. Is it worth the extra 5 to 7 grand over the Integra Type S? That's another question that I will attempt to answer. Interior definitely feels a cut above the Integra Type S, as it should, since the Integra does have Civic roots. Quite a different design to the center console here. It's much more sort of NC1 NSX looking. We have a dedicated knob for our drive modes. The transmission is controlled using these buttons, which I have always found a little bit weird. I like having a gear lever. But we can put this thing over into Sport Plus mode, and then we'll select Sport for the transmission, and we can use these paddles to put it into manual mode. Wow, this thing has a lot of low-end torque. Right off the line, it feels peppy. It just wants to get going immediately. There's no wind-up to this engine whatsoever. Very little turbo lag from this twin-scroll turbo. Now, this does have adaptive dampers, and it feels really good in Sport Plus. It feels nice and composed. The damping profile is pretty aggressive, I have to say. Quick steering ratio, not a ton of steering feel, but it's easy to place this car in the corner. So unfortunately, even in manual mode, this transmission will upshift for you once it gets close to redline. Let's turn around here. It's a very short stretch of road. First gear. transmission isn't ZF 8-speed quick, but it's also not bad. Ooh, squirrel there. It's pretty damn responsive on the downshifts. Look at that. Actually, I feel like the downshifts might be a little more impressive than the upshifts. The red line does feel a bit low in terms of the sound the engine makes. When I feel like it should be revving a little bit higher, it's already added 6,200 RPM limit. The super handling all-wheel drive system definitely feels unique. When you turn it into a corner and begin feeding the throttle to get out, you do feel like the car is helping you turn from the rear axle. It doesn't necessarily feel like a very front-wheel drive based all-wheel drive system. It's actually pretty impressive. There's only really one corner on this road where we can kind of test that. This V6 makes a pretty decent sound, by the way. We do have an active valved exhaust, just like we do in the Integra Type S. Acura seems to do a pretty dang good job with these Type S models and differentiating them using more aggressive exhaust tuning. This thing's quick enough. 355 horsepower in a 4,200 pound car might not sound like a lot, but again, the way the engine's tuned is for two things: lots of low-end and mid-range torque and very little turbo lag. Nice firm damping from the suspension. Definitely not over-damped like something like a Civic Type R. Pretty neutral coming out of corners. Doesn't feel like it wants to oversteer. Effectively, what this super handling all-wheel drive system does is it makes a much cheaper to produce front-wheel drive based platform feel less front-wheel drive. It doesn't make it feel rear-wheel drive per se, but it does make up for some of the shortcomings of front-wheel drive. And that's reflected in the fact that you can pick up this car for less than $60,000. Compare that to an equivalent BMW M340i with a few options, and then this car starts to make a lot more sense. If you're not looking for at-the-limit driving dynamics, and you want something that feels good at 7/10 while looking really unique, I mean, you barely see any of these cars out there on the road, I think this car might actually make a ton of sense. We'll put it into sport mode. Let's see if this suspension feels any different. The mid-range torque is so impressive. Honestly, this engine does not feel turbocharged. It feels like a 3.5 to 4 liter V6 naturally aspirated. The gear ratios are nice and short, closely spaced together. Third gear here. Precise front end, but really no feedback coming through the wheel, as is the case with most super sedans nowadays, sports sedans with electric power steering. In sport mode, the dampers feel about the same as they feel in Sport Plus, but if we put it into normal mode, that's when we get a really noticeably softer ride, and comfort is even softer than that. So let's actually try putting it into individual mode. Suspension and comfort should be the ideal setting now. Oh yeah, the suspension is handling this very, very bumpy road noticeably better. Every time I put my foot down from low RPM, I'm surprised. Honestly, the suspension feels really good. It might be a highlight of this car for me. Third gear, chuck it in. It feels so neutral. It feels just hooked up. It feels confidence inspiring. There's no drama to it, no understeer, no oversteer. At 7/10, this super handling all-wheel drive system does a fantastic job. Also worth pointing out that around town, this car rides quite a bit quieter. There's a lot less road noise compared to the Integra. It feels like a more premium platform, a lot more sound editing, as you would hope for a 4,200-pound sedan of this size, closer to something like a 5 Series or E-Class than a 3 Series or C-Class. One more run here. I don't like how the transmission auto upshifts even in manual mode. That is a bummer. Does it sometimes a little too early before it even hits its red line. Solid driving dynamics from the TLX Type S. It's no super sedan, it's no M3 or M5. So don't go thinking it is a cheaper version of that type of car. It's not gonna do big skids. It's not gonna blow you away with its straight line performance. This is not that car. This is a car that you'd want to daily drive. Super comfortable, great interior. You have your wireless Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, heated and cooled seats, all the driving aids you expect from an Acura. The lane keep assist works brilliantly, just as it does in the Integra. All of the creature comforts you'd want in a sub $60,000 car, while also giving you a little bit of flair. It gives you that extra performance from the V6 engine, something you don't get in the base TLX, the super handling all-wheel drive system. Things I would improve. Actually, I think the brake feel is fine, brake-by-wire. I know some reviewers have complained that this system feels very unnatural. I actually have no issues with it at all. I wish the steering had more feedback. I know electric power steering can be made to feel good. My Integra Type S is the perfect example of that. 10-speed transmission, the shift speed and smoothness is pretty impressive. Not as good as a ZF 8-speed, but good enough for this class of vehicle. I just wish it wouldn't auto upshift. That is a pet peeve of mine in manual mode. So how would I compare it to my Integra Type S? It's much less of a driver's car, but it is definitely a cut above as a premium feeling daily driver. Materials quality, as I mentioned in the beginning, is definitely better. I'm not a huge fan of this touchpad system, especially because in Acura's own menu system, you use the positioning of your finger on the touchpad to control where the mouse pointer essentially clicks. But in Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, it's more of a traditional sort of laptop-like touchpad where you move your finger on the pad in a certain direction, almost like you're swiping in order to control where the pointer goes. A bit of an inconsistent experience. Personally, you know, after using this system and the system in the Lexus IS500, I wish manufacturers would just do away with this whole touchpad control system altogether. Otherwise, this car does feel every bit of $57,000. You get what you pay for with a TLX Type S, and in this day and age, what more could you ask for? A big shout out to Sahil for letting me review this 2023 TLX Type S. Let me know what you think of this car. What are its true competitors? Is it an M340i competitor? Is it an S4 competitor? Is it too big and heavy to compete with either of those two cars? Does it even deserve the Type S badge at all? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in that next one.